I don't want to add to her anxiety. So if you promise not to tell her, we're going to win here in California on June 7th.
Could Bernie Sanders pull off an upset next week, then pull off a big surprise at the convention? John Wilson and Evan Axelbank will break down the race. Plus, the Libertarians have surged in the polls.
So, Donald?
We'll show you how Gary Johnson could shake up the race and how an independent conservative could swing it as well. Plus, Alan Grayson has a new wife who's running for his seat, and we have some questions for both of them.
You have said some things that are not civil on more than one occasion. Do you think that may be working against you?
And we'll meet the Libertarian Senate candidate who drove the party chairman to resign in protest.
You state that you were hunted at one point by the FBI and banned from your school. What was that all about?
This is Money, Power, and Politics.
Most of the time, independent candidates flame out.
Who am I? Why am I here?
Because, as the old saying goes, in politics there are only two things in the middle of the road: highway stripes and roadkill. Charlie Crist learned that one the hard way.
Well, as bad as conservative as you can get.
As an independent, can't tell you how comfortable I am as a Democrat.
But in the presidential race this year could be different because Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton have turned off a lot of voters, and somebody could take advantage of that, which brings us to the remnants of the Never Trump Brigade.
Donald Trump is a phony, a fraud.
Never Trumpers like Mitt Romney and Ben Sasse and Tom Coburn and others have all said they will not run as an independent. But Weekly Standard editor Bill Kristol stirred the pot by claiming there will be an independent candidate with a strong team and real chance that fired up the rumor mill and provoked Ben Carson to chime in with our overstatement of the week.
Well, I think what Bill Kristol and many others like him need to recognize is America right now is like a cruise ship that is about to go off of Niagara Falls with tremendous carnage and death.
So that brings us to what happens next, tremendous carnage and death aside.
The logistical challenges for an independent candidate at this late date are enormous.
Conservative writer and Iraqi war veteran David French's name has already been floated, and look for other names to pop up as well. Of course, pundits say it may be too late for any independent candidate to mount a serious bid.
And then you'd have to deal with this question about getting on the ballot in states where the deadline has already closed.
But they may be missing the point and the Never Trump movement strategy. While it's quite a long shot, a conservative independent could in fact win the White House this year just by winning a couple of states. And here's how it could happen with someone like Mitt Romney. Let's suppose he does run, even though he said he wouldn't.
I'm not familiar precisely with exactly what I said, but I stand by what I said, whatever it was.
Romney or someone like him could win a conservative western state like, say, Utah, and maybe a couple of others that did not go for Trump in the primaries. Well, in a close race, that could stop Trump and Clinton from reaching the 270 electoral votes they would need, and that would send it to the Republican-led House of Representatives to decide the winner. And in that scenario, Paul Ryan and his caucus could choose between Clinton, Trump, or someone like Paul Ryan's old running mate. And that's how someone like Mitt Romney could still get the last laugh.
A business genius, he is not.
Of course, that could also set up a fight of the century with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, and that would get ugly.
Hey, look at this! Donald Trump! Donald Trump! Donald Trump! Take it down, Mr. Oh, my God!
So an independent conservative could make a difference, and so could a third-party ticket. The Libertarians are already making some hay with Gary Johnson after their convention last week.
We could use a little bit of fun.
The Libertarian convention in Orlando had some interesting moments. But beyond the odd theatrics on the convention floor, the party picked a presidential candidate who could shake up the race.
I want you all to know that I am not an old white guy. And I am not Republican light.
Gary Johnson is a former Republican governor who embraces a libertarian agenda. He wants to shrink government and wipe out the income tax while he's live and let live on social issues.
So we're small government guys, but we're also socially liberal. And I think that's the makeup of most people in this country.
He ran as a Libertarian in 2012 and picked up around 1% of the vote. This year, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton have historic unfavorable ratings. Polling shows Johnson is already picking up around 10% of the vote, and he says he's ready to tangle with Donald Trump.
So, Donald?
Pundits have speculated Johnson could pull more from Donald Trump given Johnson's history as a former Republican. But we're not seeing that in recent polls. They show Johnson is pulling equally from Trump and Clinton.
The Libertarians have made some progress in state and national politics, but they have some drama this year in Florida.
Coming up, see why this Libertarian U.S. Senate candidate has triggered controversy within his party.
Did you in fact sacrifice a goat?
That happened.
Plus, we'll break down the presidential race with John Wilson, and we'll meet the woman who just married the man she wants to replace in Congress. Dina and Alan Grayson will join us on set. While Libertarians rallied behind Gary Johnson for president, they have a controversy over this Florida Libertarian candidate for U.S. Senate. On his website, Augustus Saul Invictus describes himself as the most dangerous Libertarian in America. And last year, Florida Libertarian Party Chairman Adrian Wiley resigned in protest of his candidacy. Wiley said Invictus vowed to start a second civil war and engages in animal sacrifice. So that's where we start our interview with Invictus.
First, did you really sacrifice a goat in a pagan ritual?
I am a pagan. I have been since I was 13 years old. The practices might seem alien, but so does drinking Christian blood every Sunday.
And did you in fact sacrifice a goat?
That happened. It was an act of thanksgiving after surviving the wilderness back in a pilgrimage in 2013.
Wiley also claims that you vowed to start a second American Civil War. Did you?
I think the Civil War is already coming. I think we all talk about it inside our living rooms, but it is still impolitic to say it in public.
Should there be a second American Civil War?
It's like my father always said growing up, America needs another Great Depression. It would teach people the meaning of life again. And if we don't have a war in this generation, then I think we're all for the worse.
You state that you were hunted at one point by the FBI and banned from your school. What was that all about?
I wrote an open letter in 2013 renouncing civilization. It's the same thing that all monks do before retreating into the wilderness to find the spirit. Apparently that upset some people who called the FBI.
Do you still renounce all of these things?
Yes. It's a spiritual renunciation. And you never go back from that.
Explain how you can renounce government, renounce your diplomas, renounce all of these things, and yet continue to pursue a path toward a place in government.
Well, you have to look at it from a spiritual perspective. When you are detached from these things, when you realize that they are material and they are alien to the spirit, then it's not so foreign a concept.
You are calling for total insurrection. That's the title of your campaign speech that kicked off your run. When you say a total insurrection, what do you mean?
I mean an insurrection in mind, heart, spirit, and body. On every level, you have to break through certain boundaries. That includes moral and social and political.
Wiley has also claimed that you support eugenics and has connected you to Nazis. Is there anything to that?
I did write a paper on eugenics in law school. I have since publicly and repeatedly renounced that paper on a policy level. I still believe eugenics are legal in this country until the Supreme Court overturns its original decision, but as a policy, I've never supported that.
Do you understand why you're getting the pushback that you're receiving from within your own party?
I understand the pushback I'm receiving from within my own
party. Well, you're
party.
being rejected, and you have the last statewide candidate in Wiley, who picked up 3.8% of the vote, who is the chairman, resigning over your candidacy.
Wiley attacked me on a religious level, saying, get out of my party, go start your own based on your own religion. So it's always been a religious issue, and after that it was personal, but it has nothing to do with libertarian philosophy.
You would be but one voice out of 100 if elected to the United States Senate. The Senate already is gridlocked. How would you expect or hope to get anything done?
Speaking on the Senate floor, I'd be able to reach the American people. I believe once the American people hear the truth and not what's, no offense, filtered through the media, then they would have to listen and they would put pressure on their own representatives.
If you had that venue and you had a few brief moments to speak to the American people unfiltered, what would you say?
I would tell the American people that governments should be afraid of the people. And if you are not a threat to your government, the government is not going to listen to you. So the only thing that you can do to change the government is to arm yourselves and be prepared for war.
So when you speak of total insurrection, you're speaking of violent insurrection.
I am.
Mr. Invictus, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick.
Libertarian Paul Stanton is also running for U.S. Senate. We've invited Stanton and all the Republican and Democratic Senate candidates to sit down with us. And you can watch the full interviews we have so far on our YouTube channel. Search for Craig Patrick's Money, Power, and Politics. You'll also find investigations and prior shows you may have missed.
Coming up, Alan Grayson just married the woman who's running for his seat in Congress, and we have an interesting interview with them together. Congressman Alan Grayson married the woman who wants to replace him. The Polk County congressman is now running for U.S. Senate, and his new wife, Dr. Dina Grayson, is running for his House seat.
Well, Congressman Grayson, Dr. Grayson, thank you for joining us, and congratulations.
Thank you.
So tell us when, how, and where did you meet?
Okay.
Well, we met on an airplane. As you've noticed, Alan is kind of tall, and I'm, well, I guess vertically challenged. And he helped me with my bag out of the overhead compartment, introduced himself. I introduced myself, but I had to rush off to a meeting. I've been developing an Ebola treatment for about 6 years or so. So I had to rush off to a meeting with some of the scientists with whom I worked. And that was that, except luckily he has very long legs and caught up with me.
Now, you were going through a difficult annulment process for some length of time. And when you Google your name, you see some reports that I can't substantiate that the two of you were seeing each other while you were still married under the law. Is that true or false?
No, it's not true.
When did you start dating?
After I separated, which was 2.5 years ago.
Which would have been?
December of 2013, if I recall correctly.
There is a source within your office at the time that said the two of you both traveled to Africa at the same time and that you were together. Was there anything to that, or?
Well, I mean, look, we knew each other before I separated, but we didn't start to date until after I got separated.
And you've worked within the pharmaceutical industry. You're aware of the rising prices of drugs. Really a question to both of you. Where do you stand with Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton both calling on Medicare to have the ability to negotiate drug prices with the manufacturers? Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, it's a challenging question, right? I think the issue is really patient access to medicines. So I do agree that patients should be paying $100,000 out of their pockets for medicines. But we also, as a scientist, with no skin in the game financially, I want to make sure that we have a great environment for innovation so that we can keep creating cures potentially for cancer and other deadly diseases. And that's what patients want too. But we also can't have patients going bankrupt to pay for their medicines.
Congressman Grayson, yes or no, should Medicare be able to negotiate drug prices with the manufacturers?
Well, I'm on record on this. I think that they should, but the important thing is exactly what Dr. Grayson said. The important thing is to make sure that people get the medicines that they need to stay healthy and alive, regardless of who has to pay for that.
Congressman is on the record, yes, on allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices with manufacturers, yes or no?
Well, already Medicare does, right? That's the way it works, is that there's...
Well, the insurers do, but there have been reports. Public Citizen came out with one that shows or suggested that they could save up to $16 billion a year, that instead of the insurers, if Medicare directly negotiated with the manufacturers.
Well, I mean, look, I want to make sure we have innovation. That's the one thing I'm worried about with this. We do in this country benefit tremendously of having science help patients' life. That is the one concern I have.
With that in mind, are you a yes or no?
I think I've answered your question, Craig. Medicare already is dealing with negotiated prices. I want to make sure we have innovative new medicines that can save lives.
You were telling me before the interview you're from Melbourne. Tell us about your record of action within the district, which now includes much of Polk County.
Sure. So we have obviously Polk, Osceola, and Orange County. I am a doctor. I'm from this area. As far as my record of action in Polk County specifically, I have not lived in Polk County, but I can tell you, again, we've got 20+% of the district that has no health insurance. I've spent my life improving the health of others. I've treated patients that had no insurance. I've done house calls in pretty tough neighborhoods, including Ferguson, Missouri. I've also spent many years treating veterans. So I think that my record stands for itself with respect to one of the biggest issues of the district. If of anybody that's running in this race, I have the long-standing, lifelong track record of helping to improve other folks' health.
And to be clear, Congressman, you are supporting your wife in her bid to replace you, yes?
Of course.
But you've expressed concerns about Democratic leadership putting the thumb on the scale in your race. To the issue of you putting your thumb in this race, beyond the fact that you're married, what's the difference?
She's the best candidate. It's that simple. I mean, people don't want a career politician for this job.
Dr. Grayson, you have the final word. Reach out to voters, tell them why they should vote for you on August 30th.
Look, I'm here to serve the folks of Central Florida. I've been very blessed in my life. I'm the first woman in my family to graduate from college, and I've become a physician. I really want to make sure that everybody can see a doctor when they're sick, that we expand Medicare to cover eyes, ears, and teeth, which it doesn't do right now. And I also think that senior citizens deserve a raise because the cost of living adjustment right now does not adequately cover the cost of health care. So I will be a champion for folks of Central Florida, and it would be a privilege to serve them.
Congratulations on your marriage, and thank you both for joining us.
Thanks, Craig.
Coming up, John Wilson and Evan Axelbank will join us for predictions and surprises in the Democratic race.
This is John Wilson's My View Now.
All right, once more, My View Now with John Wilson. Thank you once again.
Thanks for having me. I was in the neighborhood, thought I would drop in.
Let's talk about the Feel the Burn movement. Where is this ultimately going?
He's not the presumptive nominee. He can't win unless things happen to Hillary Clinton that nobody can foresee at the moment. He's still in this for him to win. He thinks he's going to be there in case she's indicted, in case the public turns against her totally, and her unfavorability rating is higher than Donald Trump's.
And you have hundreds of superdelegates who could conceivably change their minds, and that delegate math would change very quickly in such a scenario, could it not?
Boy, it could all change. I guess the caution here is that, remember, we're 6 months out from this general election. What we're seeing now in the primaries is a different set of voters. These are people who are active in politics for the most part. The general election is not. These are people who waited 4 years to vote for president. They will have a different take on this, Craig. That's why we can't put too much trust in two things, the polls and the primaries. You really can't. It's all going to change.
The triumph in the Republican Party of a billionaire industrialist and a socialist making a lot of hay in the Democratic race. What does that tell us about 2016?
Well, it tells us that young people love Bernie Sanders, don't they? They do.
And why is that?
His numbers are high. Well, they have a different expectation of government than seniors do and the middle class. I think we look at it differently. The younger people have a far more, let's just call it a far more gracious attitude about where we need to go. Far more liberal attitude, if you will, which explains why he is a socialist. So you're going to appeal to people who are out for as much of the government as they can, sadly, as they can get at some point. Everything that they're due in life, they want it from the government. Well, that's not the Republican philosophy, as you very well know.
The traditional answer is that an independent can't make it this day and age, but this is not a traditional kind of year. If a Bernie Sanders type to the left or a Mitt Romney, who knows, to the right, were to mount a third-party bid, let alone you have a four-candidate race, what would happen in that scenario?
No, you cannot have a third-party candidate. I'm surprised that I felt more of Romney than that. He started that movement to see what would happen. I think it's collapsed already. There's no way that can work. But you bring up probably a really crucial point, and that's the independents, which outnumber Republicans and Democrats, where they lean left, as you know. They lean Democrat as a group. Well, this time we're not sure where they're going to go here, because, you know, one of the things we don't know is if Donald Trump is really a Republican. We don't know that. He's very much like Reagan in that respect. He was a Democrat who became a Republican. We don't know. There's a lot for us to find out about him.
John, thank you once again.
Craig,
it's a
yes,
pleasure.
Sir.
Thank you. Well, Clinton only needs a fraction of the remaining delegates to win a majority in this, but Sanders says he is not going away. But this kind of fight within the party has played out many times before, and Evan Axelbank is here to put it in context.
The Democratic Party has never been more divided.
So I'm going to defend Dodd-Frank, and I'm going to defend President Obama.
You've received over $600,000 in speaking fees.
Never, you hear, more divided than a front-runner with 60% of delegates facing furious opponents. Never more divided than an underdog pledging a convention fight.
The convention will be a contested contest.
Let's go all the way back to the dark ages, back to 2008.
There's a set of assertions made by Senator Clinton as well as her husband that are not factually accurate.
Lifting whole passages from someone else's speeches is not change you can believe in, it's change you can Xerox.
The Democrats are throwing the election away. For what? An inadequate blackmail?
Whoa. 8 years ago, Barack Obama won the Democratic nomination with only 53% of delegates. At one point, Hillary even had more votes, and she didn't drop out until June 7th. But
what ended up happening is more than 80% of the people who voted for Clinton in the primaries 2008 ended up voting for Obama in the general election.
This time, political scientists at UVA say there are two big questions. Bernie has an even bigger share of younger voters than Obama did, and this race is between two candidates with a starker divide on issues.
So you've got this liberal insurgency in the Democratic Party that, in all likelihood, isn't going to get what they want.
But one force, named Donald Trump, may draw them together.
I think that Clinton is going to try to play nice with Sanders after the primaries are over in order to get his endorsement and his help in terms of turning out the Sanders supporters to vote for Clinton.
So a divided Democratic Party is nothing new.
Give me a break. This whole thing is the biggest fairy tale I've ever seen.
And a unified one wouldn't be either.
The next president of the United States, Barack Obama.
Well, thank you, Evan, and thank you, John, and thank you all for watching. We'll see you again next week.